Emerging during the political and economic turmoil of the 1930s, one man's charismatic leadership and radical ideology sought to challenge the established political order. However, the party's embrace of authoritarianism, violence and anti-Semitism ultimately led to its downfall. We are Fortified History, and today we delve into one of the most controversial figures in British history, Sir Oswald Mosely, and the political movement that he founded, the British Union of Fascists. Mosley's story is one of ambition, idealism, radicalism and ultimate failure. Oswald Mosely was born in 1896 into an aristocratic family in Staffordshire, England. Educated at Winchester College and the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst, he initially pursued a military career. During World War I, he served as a lieutenant in the British Army, but was injured in a flying accident, which brought an end to his active military service. In the aftermath of the war, Mosley entered politics as a Conservative MP in 1918, becoming the youngest Member of Parliament at the time. However, his dissatisfaction with the party's policies soon led to him crossing the floor and joining the Labour Party in 1924. Mosley quickly gained a reputation as a charismatic and eloquent speaker, advocating for policies to address unemployment and economic reform during Britain's post-war struggles. Mosley's frustration with mainstream politics reached a tipping point during the Great Depression. He believed that neither the Conservative nor Labour parties were adequately addressing the economic crisis. Inspired by Mussolini's fascism in Italy, Mosley founded the British Union of Fascists in 1932. The BUF promised strong leadership, economic stability and national revival, appealing to a growing number of disillusioned Britons. Mosley adopted fascist principles such as the corporatist state, centralisation of power and suppression of class conflict through state intervention. However, unlike Mussolini, Mosley initially distanced himself from the overt anti-Semitism and positioned his movement as a modern alternative to traditional parties. The BUF quickly gained traction. By 1934 it boasted around 50,000 members, including some prominent figures from British society. Its striking black uniforms, military-style rallies and powerful propaganda resonated with sections of the working class and middle class who felt betrayed by the economic and political establishment. The BUF's initial appeal soon turned into notoriety. Mosley's followers began openly embracing violence and authoritarian tactics. Their rallies often descended into clashes, most famously at the Olympia rally in June 1934. This event, intended to showcase the BUF's strength, devolved into chaos when anti-fascist protesters were beaten by BUF stewards in front of a shocked audience. The Olympia debacle marked the beginning of BUF's decline in public support. Newspapers, politicians and public opinion turned against Mosley, condemning his movement as a threat to British democracy. In the mid-1930s, the BUF adopted explicit anti-Semitism, aligning itself more closely with Nazi Germany. Mosley claimed that Jews were responsible for economic exploitation and war profiteering, mirroring rhetoric from continental fascist movements. This shift further alienated potential supporters and led to greater scrutiny from the government and law enforcement. One of the most infamous events in the BUF's history occurred on October 4, 1936 in London's East End. Mosley planned a large march through a predominantly Jewish neighbourhood, which was seen as a deliberate provocation. In response, tens of thousands of anti-fascists, including Jewish residents, trade unionists and socialists, gathered to block the route. The resulting confrontation, known as the Battle of Cable Street, saw violent clashes between anti-fascist protesters and the police, who attempted to clear the way for the BUF. Ultimately, Mosley was forced to abandon the march. The event demonstrated the strength of grassroots opposition to fascism in Britain and was a major blow to the BUF's credibility. As tensions grew in Europe, Mosley became increasingly vocal for his support for appeasement with Nazi Germany. He argued against British involvement in another war, framing it as unnecessary and destructive. His pro-German stance further marginalised the BUF as public opinion shifted against Hitler's regime. In 1940, with Britain at war, the government acted decisively against the BUF. Mosley and many of his followers were arrested under Defence Regulation 18B, which allowed for the internment of individuals deemed a threat to national security. The BUF was banned and its activities ceased. After the war, Mosley attempted to revive his political career, but his reputation was irreparably damaged. He formed the Union movement in 1948, advocating for a united Europe as a third power between the United States and the Soviet Union. However, this new effort gained little traction. and Mosely spent much of his later life in relative obscurity before dying in 1980. And there you have it, the story of Oswald Mosely and his British Union of Fascists. We hope you've enjoyed this quick look at one of Britain's most controversial figures, and will join us again as we look at another aspect of history.